Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest Pro Soccer Talk. I'm Joe Prince-Wright, your host, the lead writer editor at Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com. As you can see, two lovely lads, Nick Mendola in Buffalo, New York, and Andy Edwards in Kansas City have joined me. Gents, the international break already seems like it's gone on for months. How have you been coping through it? Nick, what have you been looking at over the last few weeks in the international soccer scene?
Oh, man, that's a good one. I loved South American qualifying for the World Cup. CONMEBOL is insane. People always ask, well, why don't Messi and Aguero and all these guys score more? Because they're chopping each other over with axes. I don't know if you saw Miguel Almiron of Newcastle waylaid with an elbow, but those games, it's like CONCACAF if all the players were much better. So I don't mean to be a jerk, but let's be honest. I mean, you've got Brazil, Colombia, Argentina, and only 4 teams automatically make it. So I love it. It's just such a wild fight.
It's brilliant. Andy, what about you? What's caught your eye over the international break?
The European games have been a bit meh, right? England, Belgium was probably the best of the bunch of kind of League A in the Nations League. Everything else, I think 3 scoreless draws. What was it on Sunday or Monday in some big teams that were in those. So, I think it's a kind of what we would have expected given what the off season and the preseason and the start of the new season has been like, and then the extra travel restrictions and protocols in place. I think really at the end of the day, just hoping everybody gets back to their clubs this week, healthy, not sick, and they're able to just return straight into the league campaigns, without any issues.
Yeah, I think the best thing about the international break is that it's over now, obviously, and now we can get back to the Premier League action because the drama, the absolute chaos it was before in the opening 4 weeks of the season has just been bonkers. So if anybody's new to Pro Soccer Talk, we talk about everything to do with the soccer world here, mostly focused on the Premier League. Us 3 chat about this anyway in our spare time, so we figured we'd grab a beer, grab a drink. Gene's recording it. They're going to record it all season long. So cheers to everyone from here in England, to you guys in the States. We've had a swig of beer now, so I think we can start. And I think the big news to really focus on, after the transfer window, after all the chaos of the first few weeks in the Premier League, I want to focus on some of the biggest surprises so far, maybe some predictions that you guys want to change. And Nick's already done this on the site on Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com. We have the preseason predictions, table standings 1 to 20. How do we want to change those? And I'm going to start with what has surprised me the most so far, and I'll go to you guys. But first and foremost, I want to get this in. The thing that surprised me the most is how good Everton are this season. I knew they were going to be good. We all kind of were talking about them top 6, but I think I've seen enough of them early in the season to suggest they could be top 4 potential. I'm not going to go as far as saying, far-flung things like they could be title contenders. I still think that's way too early. But with that midfield reboot, Decore, Allen, and then James Rodriguez pulling the strings, I know we talked about them a lot, but they have, for me, gone far and above their expectation levels early in the season. And if they can stay solid defensively, they've got Calvert-Lewin actually finishing off chances and, channeling his inner Inzaghi to just one-touch finishes in and around the box, which has been brilliant for Everton and for England now, getting off the mark over the international break. But I've been most surprised by Everton, and I know Toffee's fans everywhere will be absolutely delighted that finally they seem to be exceeding their expectations rather than just meeting them or being well below them. So that's been my biggest surprise. Nick, what about you, mate? What's surprised you the most so far?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great one, first of all. And again, the one thing we can't overlook, Everton doesn't have European football. So whereas Liverpool, after the derby, has to worry about going to the Netherlands to face Ajax, Everton has to worry about Liverpool. So that's something really to keep an eye on. Man City for me. Look, I buy the no preseason a little bit, but you can, especially when you consider United struggles, but still pretty surprising. The joke has always been with Man City. Anyone would score atop that attack, right? But 0 minutes from Aguero, 90 minutes out of Gabriel Jesus, who has a goal. That's the only one out of a center forward. The margins are still closer, right? But they're still number 1 in possession, 0.1% off the passing lead, second in shots per game. What's the difference? I mean, maybe we have overlooked how good Aguero and to an extent Jesus have been. So that's my thing. I'm really surprised by Man City. I don't think the wheels are coming off, but enough people who I think have really smart opinions say that to make me wonder if there's smoke, if there's fire under the smoke.
And Delap coming in as off the bench as a youngster. That's the only real option they have, apart from rotating Sterling and others up top. So surprised, maybe a bit unlucky.
Yeah,
bit unlucky early in the season with injuries, but maybe it shows that they don't quite have that squad depth that we all thought they did, especially in that one position. And they have been unlucky with injuries the last few years, haven't they? When you think about Laporte going down, and then other left back issues.
De Bruyne the year before, yeah,
exactly. So but that's a good one. Andy, what about you? What surprised you the most so far?
Yeah, I'm mildly surprised by both of those. Everton, I think more so than City, the injuries for City just kind of have debilitated them just a little bit. I think just about any team would suffer. Real quick, I'll go back and read what I said about Everton prior to the season. I don't think that I was wrong come the end of the season. I am shocked that they've started this way, though. The question from Nick was, what's stopping Everton from being a bona fide top 6 contender? And my response was, don't take this the wrong way, Everton fans. But the answer is, they're Everton. So, a bit harsh, maybe. I think they'll fall back a little bit to the pack by the time, we get to the midway point of the season or so. But Ancelotti's obviously done very well. And we've talked about James Rodriguez every single week here. I think the most shocking thing is kind of the upside down nature of the table at the moment. You've got 3 of the top 6 sides sitting at the top of the table with Everton, Aston Villa, and Leicester. And then you've got the 2 Manchester clubs down in 14th and 16th place in the table. I think just about who you would expect there in the relegation zone, but everything just seems to be flipped upside down. And I kind of wonder if the strangeness of this season is going to be somewhat of an equalizer for some of these smaller clubs. And Nick mentioned the fact that, teams not having European competition to contend with, that this season more than ever before might be the biggest difference and kind of level the playing field for some of these smaller clubs. And actually, we should have seen this coming. I think that someone from kind of that mid-table just outside the top 6 would make a big jump up this season because of that advantage. They're going to compact a season into 7.5 months, whereas it usually takes 9 or 9.5 months. That's a major deal if you're then flying off to the continent once every other week for 3 months, as you do during the group stage. You go through, you've got even more games in the knockout round. So it's really going to, I think by the time we get to probably March or April, we're going to look at some of these top 6 sides, the top 6, the big 6, and say, they might run out of gas. They might not get over the line. They might have to win Champions League or Europa League if they fall down into it to get into Champions League again next season.
Yeah, I think this has got like a transitional vibe around it with a lot of the big teams spending big, rebuilding, and almost that 2015-16 sort of season where Leicester finished, obviously won the title. Southampton, West Ham were up there all season long. Teams that really struggled, Chelsea and Liverpool those seasons. Yeah, really interesting. And I would also want to say the fact that there's been no fans so far, no crowds, it's not as intimidating for some of the smaller teams to go to the big clubs and get a result and be like, you know what, we're going to attack. We're going to go at these teams. We're going to play our game. So that's definitely, some of the weirdness early in the season we can put down to that. Let's see if it's going to carry on. Okay, next, I want to say, not that we're advocating for anyone to lose their job or whatever, but pick one manager who is under pressure already. Andy, I'm going to come to you first with that one. Who do you think's on the hot seat?
So I mentioned this, I think it was 2 weeks ago, or was it 1 week ago? Either way, Pep Guardiola is in just kind of an odd situation for him. And I think the phrase you used there, Joe, was perfect. A time of transition, not only for City as a club, but for Pep as well. This is kind of the MO of his managerial career is 3, maybe 4 years, really good, maybe not quite get you over the line to win the Champions League unless he's got Lionel Messi and Xavi and Iniesta and all those. But Rebecca Lowe on the lowdown last week after they lost to Leicester made a really, really interesting point. And it's the second time that the studio crew has done that around City in a couple weeks. It was Robbie Mustoe first, but she was asked, do you think that Pep will be there at the end of the season? And she said, I don't think he will. And you could tell that it was very difficult to get those words out, but she didn't. She thought that kind of on his own accord, that given the way that the season was going, where the project was headed, what was going to be required going forward, I think being probably, the impetus for that he might just walk away at some point this season. If it gets to a certain point where he realizes, all right, this is no longer a now project. This is a rebuilding project. And he's never done that. He has never done that. He's taken over a soon to be all-time great team at Barcelona. He took over a 3 or 4 or 5-time defending Bundesliga champion in Bayern Munich, and then he came to City with all the money in the world and a couple of titles already in the bag, and he's won them a couple more, to be fair to him, but he's not elevated them to a new level, which was what the expectation was for him coming. And so he might look at it and say, well, I'm not going to meet that objective. I'm not the guy to build again for 2 or 3 years down the road. Might just be time to walk away. So I don't think it's going to happen soon or first, maybe this season, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on if their season continues to kind of go in the way that it is.
Yeah, Pep Guardiola, not a name that I would have picked out right away, but that's a really interesting point. Nick Mendola, I know maybe on the other side of Manchester, you're maybe a bit concerned about what's going on there.
Yeah, for sure. I'll tell you what, especially because the other 2 clubs that I think are in trouble have club legends at the helm, call it the Eddie Howe effect, but with Sean Dyche and Chris Wilder. I'm worried about those teams, but those coaches aren't in trouble. If anyone's going to get them out of it, it's them. So I look at Manchester United, and I would say he's in trouble and under pressure, but you look at the releases on deadline day, the press releases from that club, and whether it was Pellistri or Cavani, it's all working with the manager. Once I talk to the manager. So clearly, at least the comms team has his back, right? Like they're propping him up there. But I look at them early this season, granted they had that slow start. I believe in Marcus Rashford. He's been way off his game, though. I don't know how much I believe about Martial. He's been way off his game. If you look at some of these player rating services, they have 4 players in the top 200. Bruno's out of this world. Let's be honest. Bruno's having as good of a season as just about anyone outside of Calvert-Lewin and Kane and Son. But then it's McTominay, Lindelof, and Fosu Mensah. So this is a team that is woefully underperforming. Maybe that's a sign that it's going to turn around, but how is it going to turn around? And I can't help but think it should be cued into their manager.
I agree with that. And I think, Ollie, he maybe isn't all down to him. We spoke about this in the past. He hasn't been maybe backed as much as he should have been, especially this summer. In the previous window, he got Bruno Fernandes and obviously...
And Harry Maguire and Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who he's not even playing all the time.
So... that it's a bit confusing from his point of view, but I think he's running out of time and running out of goodwill. And we've spoken about the nostalgia and the Ollie's a legend factor. That only buys you so much time. We're coming up for 2 years now since he came in on an interim basis. So it's kind of time. It's kind of time to really say you're going to stick or you're going to twist.
Well, isn't it the worst thing that keeps happening to the club is that he kind of keeps having halfway success? If he would just be really poor for a full season and it would bear out at the end, they could say, okay, this is just not working. But he did what he did, taking over interim and finished the season strong and then got him into Champions League. Again, you can't, as United, given where they've been the last few seasons, you can't look at that and say, okay, that's not good enough for us. We're not thankful for that and we're going to get rid of you. You can't do that at that point. And so if they would just fall flat once, they could then make the big change that I think they need to do.
I think for Ollie, he's probably going to end up finishing 7th or 8th this season and maybe get to the Champions League semi-final. That's kind of the way it's been going, like get to a semi-final, lose, kind of that glorious failure. That's kind of just keeping him in the job. I worry about Scott Parker, a guy I'm going to bring up on the hot seat. I don't think he deserves to be there, but I think the sounds and the noises coming out of Fulham from him against Tony Khan, the co-owner, and some of the tweets that have been going around. And, Khan's been outspoken. A lot of fans like that. Parker didn't really seem to agree with it after the defeat of Aston Villa. The transfer window was underwhelming for me. We already talked about that in my transfer grades last week. And I don't think he deserves to get fired because he did a great job to get them promoted at the first time of asking back to the Premier League. But I just think if you get to December and January and Fulham are cut adrift, then it might just be better for both parties to move on. And then, hey, maybe Ranieri will turn up at Craven Cottage again. Who knows? But it's going to be interesting because there's a lot of managers now I think will be cut more slack because, as you guys have said, short summer, not much of a pre-season, transfer window is all wedged in. It's difficult. And, do clubs really want to pay off managers now who are on long-term contracts? Financially, can they do that and bring in someone else on higher wages? The big clubs can, sure, but lower down the table, I'm not too sure that's going to happen.
Do we not think that maybe with Fulham specifically, as a specific example with Parker, that maybe just keeping him there would be the right move? Because I think you can look at their first 4 games and say they're going down. There's
Yeah.
almost zero chance of them staying up.
There's,
They might push Derby County for the all-time lowest points total in the league.
yeah.
And at that point, is it really all down to the manager? One, I think, is the first question. And then two is, does changing the manager again as you go down or before you go down fix anything? Does it help at all? Or is he very well proven at the championship level that he can get you right back up? And if you can keep some of that same squad together. So, maybe he survives just on a long-term play if he can, kind of patch things up with Tony Khan. I think that would be the only one.
Absolutely. So let's move on to the final part of this segment. Lads, this is your chance now to revise one of your preseason predictions. So we posted a roundtable post before the season started. Maybe we were giddy just to have the new season, but some pretty wild takes out there. I'm going to revise one of mine first, and that is that we were asked, will Manchester United finish in the top 3? And I obviously said that they would. And I want to quote something I said. I think they will continue to improve at the back. Yeah, that's not going great after that thing against Tottenham. But I looked at it. I spoke to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at the end of Project Restart, and we were chatting about defensively. That kind of went under the radar, right? They're so good going forward with Rashford, Fernandes, Martial, Greenwood came to life over the summer. They kept a huge amount of clean sheets down the stretch last season to finish in the top 4 and get to the Europa League. The latter stages of that competition. So I don't know what's happened defensively, but for me, I've seen enough to think that Man United aren't going to finish in the top 4, let alone in the top 3. So
wow,
quickly, lads, one sort of thing you'd like to revise from the early season predictions.
Sure. I'll tell you what, a little bit of humble bragging. Got to be honest. I said Everton could challenge for the top 6, but that the biggest question mark was whether or not Mason Holgate and Dominic Calvert-Lewin could take big enough steps to get it done. I thought they'd get better, especially looking at what Calvert-Lewin did last year under Ancelotti. I didn't think he'd start looking like Sheffield's answer to Robert Lewandowski. I mean, he's been unbelievable. So I was wrong in that was my question mark. But I did also say that Jordan Pickford would continue to be a problem. They've signed Robin Olsen on loan. And I'll add this into the equation. Andy mentioned that Manchester United, or maybe it was you, Joe, he always has that moment, Solskjaer, where he kind of rescues himself and gives himself a few weeks. And of course, Jordan Pickford gets a win over Belgium to let everybody think that he's so good for England. It's insane, and goes back to Everton and can't do it. So he's now my biggest question. But again, looking at what they've done, and Hamas looking like a freed man, like this free beast, like he's been uncaged, makes me think, with especially with no European football, that's a top 4 team.
Andy, what about you?
I feel pretty good about kind of where teams are going to finish the season. I think we should all probably hold our hands up and say, well, maybe we got that one wrong on our Golden Boot prediction. We all 3 went for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, and he currently has 1 goal through the first 4 games of the season for. So he could get hot and he could surely catch up. But you've got a couple guys now sitting on 6 already in Son Heung-min and Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I would back Son, if he stays healthy, to continue to score throughout the season, given the talent that is now around him in that attack for Spurs. So I think he's got staying power at the top. Calvert-Lewin, remains to be seen just a little bit. Jamie Vardy with 5, Mohamed Salah with 5 as well. So maybe Vardy falls away just a little bit because he's not getting shots from open play. I think 4 of those 5 goals are from the penalty spot. He's taken just a handful of shots from open play, which is a bit of a worry for Leicester, who I thought had the best chance of kind of those middling teams of making a push towards the top 6 or 4 this season. So maybe got that a little bit wrong. And I think to top it off, I put Paul Pogba in my team of the year. Not going so great so far.
No, not great. And I'm sure, lads, we'll want to revise these preseason predictions pretty much every week here on out, because it's been so crazy for the first month of the season. So those have been what's the things that surprised us so far, what we'd like to change from our predictions, and the managers that are under pressure. So now let's move on to club power rankings. First volume of the season. The article is up on NBCSports.com on Pro Soccer Talk. Nick Mendola has taken ownership of this. So Nick, I want to kind of you to walk through 5-1 what you think of these top 5 so far, what these clubs have done, and maybe explain a bit of methodology. So I'm going to kick things off. And you've got Leeds United at number 5, which seems pretty decent after their draw of Man City to really showcase that they're not the flash in the pan that many people thought they were.
Yeah, and I thought they were too, but let's look at them. They show up on opening day against Liverpool and they're not worried. Again, maybe that's different in a loud Anfield, and they keep adding. They've spent, I think, 140 million. We haven't seen Rodrigo incredible yet, but Diego Llorente, Rafinha. These are players that are going to get the job done for them. So I'm pretty, or could get the job done for them in pushing them over the top. So I like the look of them. Joe, I had Liverpool at number 4, and this is where I want to explain the power ranking methodology.
Explain.
Yeah, look, I know they just allowed 7 goals, and it was terrible, and that they can't keep a clean sheet to save their lives right now. But these are the things we want to look at when we're breaking ties, especially early in the season in our power rankings. 1, form is important. How do they look? Number 2, and this folds into that, sense and strength matter. So a club like Liverpool that we've seen absolutely dominate for 2 years, I'm not going to let one knock them down to par. The table matters. Head-to-head is going to be a big tiebreaker if you're worrying between the 2 guys. And finally, numbers are better than luck. Look how many wicked deflections Villa got. That was not as bad as it looked on the score sheet. So, and bonus, I'll revise my golden boot. Salah's looked amazing this year. I mean, he's looked so good. So he might be the guy I would pick right now. That's why I have Liverpool at 4. Problems with that, Joe? I mean, you're really bothered by this.
No, I just think that I would probably say that maybe you're down towards mid-table in the power rankings. That's probably where I'd have them, just because defensively there's been a pattern, but they've also been unlucky with Alisson getting obviously injured and Adrian coming in and just having a nightmare. There's been enough defensively, I think, to have them a bit lower. But I'm not going to argue with the methodology here, Nick. I mean, you got to trust, the process and trust what you go through there. So I agree with number 3. You have Tottenham at number 3, and I know Andy agrees with this, and maybe Andy will have them even higher. But everything seems to be clicking into place nicely for Mourinho. And I mean, my main thing is you have at number 3, but are they title contenders now? We're already talking about Tottenham in that conversation to be after Liverpool and Man City. Are they the next biggest title contenders?
Well, now that the trips to Bulgaria and Macedonia are out of the way, hopefully for a while. Look, I think for them, it comes down to either Carlos Vinicius being the truth as a spell for Kane, especially with his injury history, or maybe we see a little Bale as a striker. But that's the big question for you. If they're a title contender, then that center forward depth has to pay off for them. So that is my only question with them. I really think so, because I think they'll add some center back depth here. And that's my only worry is can they stay healthy and productive at center forward?
Yeah, I think half the league is a title contender for the next couple weeks at least, right? until we figure out if Liverpool and City are going to come out of this funk to start the season. Is it going to be another weird year, like Joe mentioned earlier, with Leicester in 2015-16, where nobody saw that coming? And it happened because nobody stepped up to stop it. Everybody had a down season that year, and there was a huge void that somebody had to fill, and Leicester did it. So until then, I think that we can say, yes, Spurs are going to be in the conversation, and they're one of the teams that could push on and make it a 3 or 4 team race, assuming that Liverpool and City both get back there. It's still, though, and I know I keep coming back to this, it's still going to come down to Mourinho getting out of his own way. He seems to have patched up the feud with Tanguy and Ndombele, which is great because he was sensational against Manchester United, and that's the player that they signed him to be. He's got the depth at every position, maybe outside of center back, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Nick, because it's kind of a backwards world for Spurs now. They've been so strong there defensively, and now that's their weakest area by far. But he's got a world-class player in Bale coming in that can take them up to that next level, assuming that he's got something still to give.
Absolutely. And number 2, Nick, you have Aston Villa. We talked about title contenders. Maybe Villa fans are dreaming about a title push early in the season, but they certainly looked good enough to maybe be in the top 6 conversation, or at the very least be in a top 10 position this season. I mean, brilliant start, smashed Liverpool. I'm going to ask you, I want one quick answer, one word answer. Are they for real with Jack Grealish leading them? Are they going to finish in the top 10, Nick?
Top 10? Sure. That's how confident I am.
I'll take that. And then another team that's sort of surpassing expectations. They're number 1 in your club power rankings. Everton, we talked about them a lot. The Toffees are flying. Again, Are they for real, gents? I mean, quickly to wrap this section up, do you think that Everton could sustain a top 4 push? Andy, I'm going to start with you first.
Top 4, yeah, I think for all the reasons I just mentioned about there being kind of a void there. But at come the end of the season, if everybody else figures their problems out and Everton kind of just continue on and they fall back to earth a little bit, I think they could definitely fall out of kind of that top 4 race. So I will believe it in, let's say, late November. If they're still there in late November, then I'll believe that they're really, really for real.
Nick, Everton, Premier League title winners this season.
If they beat or get a result on Saturday against Liverpool, then I'm in for whatever you want to put them up there. Jurgen Klopp and Carlo Ancelotti, both with 2 weeks to plan. That's my thing. Matip coming back as well. So yes, that's where I'm at. If they get a result Saturday, which I'm sure we're about to talk about, absolutely, I'll put them in for anything.
Okay, so let's move on to previewing Match Week 5. The Premier League is going to be back after the international break. Over at Pro Soccer Talk at NBCSports.com, we've got all the latest team news, previews, schedules, stream links. We've got you covered for everything you need ahead of this weekend. And gents, I'm going to start by talking about Everton against Liverpool. Massive Merseyside derby, as we said. Is this the chance for Everton to finally start to dominate or overtake Liverpool this season? It's been a long, long time since the blue half of Merseyside have had that. There's obviously other storylines in and around Liverpool with tier 3 lockdown situation in the UK, which means the city is the only city in England right now that has had extra restrictions due to COVID-19 and a big outbreak in that city. So all the focus will be on the footballing side there, but the local residents of Liverpool have really gone through a lot so far. But for Liverpool, it's all about, can they weather this storm without Alisson in goal? Is Adrian able to just put together a couple of decent performances over the next month or so to weather that storm? And then for Everton, is it their year? We already talked about, James Rodriguez pulling the strings. You have Calvert-Lewin scoring goals. Richarlison, let's not forget about him and his impact under Ancelotti. And then that midfield of Alan and Decore are brilliant. And I love the balance they give this Everton side. So, Nick, it's one of your favourite topics about Jordan Pickford. And he, again, looking at, can Adrian put together a string of fine displays for Liverpool? Can Pickford just be solid? And if he is, I think Everton have got a chance of beating Liverpool here, because I think all over the pitch, their players are maybe in better form. They're delivering a bit better, especially defensively than Liverpool at the moment. So I want to see if Liverpool can respond after that massive defeat to Aston Villa before the international break. How hard has that hit them? Has it hit their confidence? I mean, you're talking about players who won Champions League and Premier League, so in back-to-back seasons, so they shouldn't be lacking in confidence. But still, a 7-2 shellacking at the hands of Aston Villa, that's going to make you think twice about playing out from the back or doing things you usually do. So this is a game I cannot wait. Merseyside derby is on Saturday, 7:30 a.m. Eastern time on NBCSN. So that's the game I'm looking forward to most this weekend. And Nick Mendola, I want to pass over to the next game to preview. Manchester City against Arsenal. That should be a beauty, shouldn't it? From a footballing purist point of view, this is a great game to watch.
Yeah, sign me up for this. I'm dialed in, and the reason I'm dialed in is because every time we see, at least until they prove to us, until at least Mikel Arteta proves to us that he's either below or above standard, I love that he has Pep's whole last 3 years worth of mentality and game planning and how he viewed things. It gives me as his former assistant, it gives me this ultimate kind of rush of how are they going to come out there. I mean, you mentioned it before with our last matchup, right? Ancelotti has a great record against Klopp all time. And you look into that game where it's not just about who they pick to play, but how are they going to tactically approach? And this is the one I'm looking for. What is Pep doing? What holes does Arteta see? Arteta has seen Pep's preparation when he's had center back injuries and woes before. So he knows exactly what the B plan or C plan usually is. And the Pep is now thinking that. And is he, it's the chess, right? Is he going off of that? Or that's what I love about football, the mental side of it. And I can't wait for this one. Thomas, right? How is he going to look in his first game? Is he definitely going to start? And again, as I mentioned in our last show, this is a guy who Atletico Madrid was actually going to break the bank for. They don't do that a lot. So they saw his value. And how's Pep going to attack him? Because it's that's a challenge too.
Absolutely. And Andy, Tottenham against West Ham United, big London derby. Talking about players coming in, Gareth Bale could be available. What are you looking forward to in this game this weekend?
Yeah, I think if we were looking for a surprise team of the last 2 weeks, I think West Ham would probably be that one. The back-to-back results that they've pulled off, just absolutely smashing a couple of what we thought were going to be pretty good teams in Wolves and Leicester City. Again, the Premier League makes no sense this season, and so it makes perfectly good sense. But I guess with David Moyes coming back to this team, you have to ask yourself, is that good? Is that a good thing? Alan Irvine, the last couple, Nick, you're shaking your head there, but I kind of agree. And I know that he's been fairly hands-on and kind of, setting up training and the tactics and everything, communicating to Irvine. But what if it's just a bit of, the source of the voice is kind of the problem there for that team and for that club. And just getting somebody else in there for a couple of weeks kind of refreshed everything and gave everybody a new feeling, kind of a new lease on life, if you will. And that's gotten a couple of really good performances out of them. Now, they've been still fairly kind of Moyes-esque defensive, sitting a lot deeper. We're going to just destroy you on the counterattack, but they've actually destroyed teams on the counterattack. And so that's a little bit different than what we've seen from West Ham the last kind of, full season or so that Moyes has been in charge. It's been pretty stale for the most part with him kind of leading that team. And so I'm just curious if this is something that's going to stick around. They've got another really good chance against a good team to kind of reprove themselves once again and show like, hey, this is actually for real. I think Pablo Fornals has been one of the standout players of the season so far. I've had I guess you could say privilege of covering the last couple of games for West Ham, and he's stood out head and shoulders above everyone else. And I know Jared Bowen is getting credit, for a lot of the goals, and Mikel Antonio has played really well, but Fornals has done everything on both sides of the ball for that team. And so he's going to be really, really important. And how that new Spurs midfield with Ndombele kind of settling into it is going to handle him. And then for Spurs, I think the big thing everybody wants to know, is Gareth Bale going to play? I would imagine he's on the bench. Mourinho's been very complimentary of how he's looked in training. And I know it's a team, provided video and everything, but the finishing looked really good with that left foot coming in off the right side. And it just gives you a hope and an idea of Bale on that side, Son on that side, Kane in the middle. Doesn't matter who's behind. They're going to score a ton of goals, and they're going to be really, really fun to watch. That's going to be a team that can break you down if you sit in deep defensively the way that West Ham will, but they're also going to be a team that's got some pace and a little bit of athleticism and good vision as well. That's one thing about counterattacking that we look past is it takes really good vision and high IQ to run a counterattack well in the Premier League. And they have that in just about everybody in that team. And so, this is going to be a really interesting challenge for both teams kind of in, different ways.
Absolutely. And week 5 in the Premier League is coming up again on Pro Soccer Talk and NBCSports.com. We will have you covered, everything you need, how to watch the games. And my goodness, we cannot wait for it to come back. To finish Pro Soccer Talk this week, some breaking news in the soccer world. And that is the news that Cristiano Ronaldo has tested positive for COVID-19. The Portuguese national team has said this during their international break. He's in UEFA Nations League action. So, gents, I know this is something that a lot of managers in the Premier League around Europe were concerned about with their players flying to different parts of the continent, different parts of the world even, to play friendly games and over the international break. So Ronaldo is probably sort of one of the highest profile athletes in the world to have COVID-19. So, Nick, your thoughts on this situation? Does this kind of mean for the international break that managers and nations will be a bit more wary, perhaps, of sending players here, there, and everywhere to play games?
Yeah, I think you might want to have it be the end of friendlies. Remember, Portugal just played Spain. They just played France. Those are all-star teams of club football, right? Those are the best players in the world are headed there. So what happens if Mbappe brings it back to France? And again, these are just theories. He brings it back to PSG and it gets to Neymar, etc. Should be the end of friendlies. We saw Mexico. I know they got a big win against the Netherlands, but should they have even been there? And I want to credit U.S. Soccer for this. They could have went to Europe. They didn't. And, big ups to them.
Andy, for you, is it kind of a risk taking these players out of the league bubbles and club bubbles they're in for these international games?
Yeah, I mean, it is, of course, anytime you come out of kind of a safe space that they're in at the moment. I think it's also probably important to note that given that this is now popping up, he could have contracted it prior to leaving for the international team. You know, with the 2-week period that is possible, it could have been beforehand when he was in Italy, where, you know, they've had plenty of problems with the virus as well. So yeah, it's really unfortunate. And just 30 minutes later, after we said, well, we hope everybody returns to their clubs healthy and without the virus this week. Well, Ronaldo, like you say, you know, second biggest name in the world.
Absolutely. So the breaking news is that Cristiano Ronaldo has tested positive for COVID-19. We'll have more on that on Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com throughout the week. Gents, thanks for joining me as always. It's been a pleasure, and I'll speak to you all very soon.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe. Make sure you subscribe to watch highlights all season long, and always join us every weekend at 7 a.m. on NBCSN for Premier League mornings. Plus, make sure you subscribe to Peacock Premium as well, where you can watch exclusively live 175 games and same-day on-demand replays of all 380 Premier League matches as well.